Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Data Analytics and Sports. Today, we're talking football. Things off, I talked briefly about Deshaun Watson wanting out of the Texans organization, the Houston Texans organization. A couple days, I believe like the 5th or the 6th or something like that, I uploaded it, and I didn't love the way I handled the conversation, especially when it came to like a specific player, Brett Favre, commenting on Deshaun Watson wanting out of the Houston Texans organization. And looking at Brett Favre, I called out the hypocrisy of Brett Favre in he's sort of like the anti-Deshaun Watson, where instead of wanting to leave, he almost forced an organization to let him to stay, which at first glance, it sounds like I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite because I'm all about player empowerment. And I think if you can strong arm an organization into like almost forcing them to let you stay, you should. But I think in that same vein, if you are allowed to force an organization to let you stay, you should then be allowed to force an organization to let you leave. And it's interesting because this is nothing new for the vast majority of the population. If you have a job, or I wrote that if you have a job and they don't treat you well and you have the financial security to leave, legally you are allowed to do so. In most, there's some professions where it's up in the air, but for most professions, obviously if you're like some big time CEO, it doesn't apply to you. But I worked at like a Jewel Osco deli for like 6 months to like 8 months, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna leave, and they're like, okay, well we can't really do anything to stop you, so just let us know 2 weeks in advance. That's all you got to do. You just got to be like, hey, granted, I didn't sign like a contract or anything. I'd imagine it's different if you're like a musician or an author even. I'd imagine it's a little different. But for the vast majority of the population, if you don't want to work somewhere, you can just go. And I understand that football is very different. There's a lot more money involved. But anyway, back to Brett Favre. I don't blame Favre for wanting to play as long as possible. I can't knock the guy. You get paid, $5 million a year as a good backup back then. If you want to stay as long as $5 million for backup, like $800,000 for practice squad. Like there's that one Daniel Tosh stand up where he's like, how can you blame Brett Favre? Do you know how much a quarterback makes? And I agree. Quarterbacks make way too much money for someone to ever want to retire. Some people want to, just like Andrew Luck, because they don't care about money. But I can't blame someone for being like, I'm good at this. I love doing this. I'm going to do this until I physically can't anymore. But either play your best and get replaced or retire. That's just how the world is supposed to work. If you can strong arm your organization into letting you stay, to then flip on a dime and be like, hey, you're not allowed to strong arm an organization to let you leave, it kind of seems like Brett Favre, and this is, just an idea, is maybe a huge hypocrite. Could be. I'm just saying, it could happen. Hey, I don't know, maybe. For all I know, Brett Favre is the most intellectual person alive, or maybe, hear me out, he's a bit of a hypocrite. And it doesn't hurt that Brett Favre, a very well-known Trump donor, Trump supporter, is friends with Bob McNair, or was friends with Bob McNair. I believe he passed away, the former owner of the Houston Texans, also donated large sums of money to Trump, which is interesting. I don't like to get political, but it's interesting how people donate to Trump. Am I confused? Is he not a billionaire? Is he not worth freaking like billions with a B, billion with an S, billions, multiple billion of dollars, billions of dollars. I always thought he was the smartest, the richest. Why are you giving him money? He doesn't need it. I don't get it. Why are people so stupid? It's like if Tiger Woods comes to me and is like, hey man, can I borrow $5? I'm gonna be like, what? No, you're Tiger freaking Woods. You don't need $5. No, what? No. Same with like LeBron or Tom Brady. If they come up to me like, hey, real quick. I'm running for mayor. Can I have $200? I'm gonna be like, dude, get out of my face. But I guess if you're Brett Favre and you're a maniac and you want to give a couple $1 million to a billionaire, I mean, I guess why not? Why not? But it's just so hypocritical how we as like fans of the NFL and the NBA, if a player underperforms his contract and gets cut, we praise the front office for good cap management. But if he overperforms it, we crush him if he wants more money. If, who was it? Was it Khalil Mack? Yeah, Khalil Mack for the Raiders, or maybe it was Aaron Donald for the Rams. They held out like training camp, or like the optional like training camps or whatever, and we just crushed them because they were like all-time great players who didn't want to play for $5 million a year. It's like we are so hypocritical as a fan base to not understand, it's difficult because these jobs are so different than the ones that I could ever possess and the vast majority of the population could ever possess. So it's a little difficult to like put ourselves in their shoes, but sometimes you just gotta. Sometimes it's difficult to relate to someone, but that's when someone's empathy comes out the most. If I'm able to relate to a 28-year-old African-American millionaire and I'm a 20-year-old white guy, then hey, I'm pretty empathetic. I'm pretty sympathetic. I'm capable of putting myself in shoes of someone who I'm never going to meet Aaron Donald. I'm okay with that. But I can still kind of put myself in his shoes a little bit. And I think that the people who can't, it's because their emotional intelligence and their ability to like perceive what others feel is just so lacking. So it's kind of like people telling on themselves, really, when they're like, I don't want Deshaun Watson. I want Deshaun Watson to shut up and play. It's like, well, if someone said that to you, you'd punch him in the face. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm a data scientist. Or data analyst, data scientist, if someone comes to me and is like, hey, I don't think data scientists should tell me how to cook, I'd be like, shut the fuck up and let me make this sandwich for myself, or I'm going to punch you. It's not that difficult. But for some people can't be reasoned with, I suppose. Brett Favre's at the top of that list. Like, he has one job. Just watch the NFL. You can talk about it, but just praise it. There's no reason for him to be such an open hypocrite. Like, you can be a private hypocrite. He's just being an open hypocrite. And the other thing is this, too, with Deshaun Watson wanting out. Because in my last video, I really just talked about this from a football perspective. I was like, hey, the Houston Texans team, they don't really have any picks. They don't really have a head coach. They don't really have a roster. He should want out. But then I sat and I thought about it, and I was like, oh yeah. The team owner once said, we can't have inmates running the prison, which a shocking number of people weren't like profoundly like, what is he talking about? Because for me, that implies two things, and I think this is kind of interesting. One, he's implying that everyone who works for him is a prisoner, which is in and of itself not good. You don't want to be considered a prisoner. You don't want your boss to look at you and be like, oh my God, I consider you a prisoner. But also, too, that implies that he's running a prison. I don't think he realized that when he said it. I think maybe, just maybe, he overlooked that. Like, if I'm working at like a bakery or something and this guy's like, oh yeah, it's like, you guys are unionizing? Oh, we can't have prisoners overtaking the prison. It's like, A, I don't like being compared to a prisoner. But also, B, did you just like openly admit to running your company like a prison? Like you are, I don't know, the warden? It was a little telling. It was a little telling of like how much he values his employees and also how his management style is. It sort of tells you that it's racist. He has a racist management style. I didn't know that was a type of man. I thought it was like authoritarian. I thought it was like democratic. Racist is a third leadership style. I didn't know it. I didn't know that was the case. Yeah, and like, how can you blame Deshaun Watson for playing for such like just an awful organization? And I really am torn on stuff like this because no one else is really, like, it's hard for me to feel bad. And again, this ties into the whole like being empathetic towards other people. It can sometimes be difficult to want for others what is not given to you. And we see this throughout history, but especially recently, it's really hard to want millionaire NFL players to be afforded opportunities and like benefits that I don't have as a non-millionaire NFL player. For them to be like, I want complete control over where I work and who I work for and who's in charge of me, who I'm in charge of, and the fact that really no one else outside of the CEOs and the billionaires really have that luxury. Because for most of us, we barely even get to choose where we work, much less who we work for, who we work with, what we do. I don't know what the real world equivalent is to what sort of offense we run, but it just seems as though he's asking for things that the majority of people are not afforded, and he's also worth millions. But again, sometimes you just gotta look past it. Sometimes you really just gotta it's incredibly difficult to put yourself in the shoes of a millionaire. I'd imagine it's very comfortable, but when looking at Deshaun Watson, you have to. And if you do that, if you have that emotional intelligence, you will see, oh, I see why he wants to leave. I get it. There's no way he's enjoying his time there. And I know 90% of people don't enjoy their jobs at all. Or not at all. That's probably way too high of a percentage, but most people don't enjoy their jobs. So to be like, oh my God, feel bad for this millionaire quarterback who doesn't enjoy his job to the fullest, it's difficult. It is difficult, but if you have the emotional intelligence and the ability to empathize with people to a certain degree, you should look at this Deshaun Watson situation and be like, oh, I side with him. I see where he's coming from. It's difficult for me to wish for someone what I don't have, but I'm gonna do it. And so that's what I think. It's my very lengthy way of supporting an argument that I really only just touched on it. I could really talk about this for hours. The whole defending billionaires while sort of, because it's interesting because he's asking for what billionaires have, and we're crushing him and not the billionaires who have that. It's just interesting in my opinion. I don't know. I just think every time we go after a player or a coach or a general manager and be like, oh my God, you guys are so stupid. How do you not know what you're doing? We never know what the owner's like. Throughout the entire time at the Houston Texans, I heard nothing throughout the David Carr era or the Brock Osweiler era where I'm like, oh my God, these idiots do not know what they're doing. If the owner walks in and is like, hey, you're drafting this guy, you gotta say yeah, otherwise you're fired. If the owner comes in and is like, hey, general manager of the Houston Texans, my daughter went to school with David Carr and he's a really nice guy, you gotta draft him. Or Brock Osweiler went to school with my niece's grandson's nephew or some weird shit like that, and they were somewhat good friends. You got to give him a 3-year, $80 million contract. You do. You don't have another choice. That's your boss. That's your billionaire boss. What are you going to say in response? No. All right. Have fun in Cleveland. Houston's at least a fun place to live. God, that's just awful. That's terrifying. But that's my 2 cents. That was my very long rambling way of saying Deshaun Watson should get out if he wants to get out. But now, pivoting from that, there is a very interesting topic that was recently, it wasn't shown to me, but I just saw it on Twitter, I believe. And it was for what the Bears are going to do going into next season. So I'm dying. I need chapstick right now. I am absolutely dying. Much better. Okay. It was looking at what on earth the Bears are going to do going into next season, especially around the quarterback position, because I just wrote and I published it. I don't think I've officially advertised it on my Twitter. My Twitter again at D_A_S_45, all caps, no spaces, just underscores. Looking and like predicting what the Chicago Bears should do heading into the 2021 season. And the biggest thing was that Allen Robinson, their star wide receiver, who did he play for before the Bears? Was it Tennessee? I can't remember. But star 27-year-old wide receiver, he's like in the middle of his prime. He's got 4 to 5 more years of prime left, most likely. And he's basically just come out and said, like, yeah, there's no way I'm re-signing with the Bears. I want to play with an actual quarterback. And I really can't blame him. Like, the Bears have had just awful luck with the quarterback, especially at the quarterback position. But it got me thinking, really the only area in which the Bears don't need drastic improvement is the defense. Everything on offense needs like a drastic overhaul, especially, the wide receiver position. That Jimmy Graham contract was awful. I don't know why we did that. Obviously the quarterback, offensive line play, everything. Like almost, aside from running back with David Montgomery, scrap everything, start over. I mean, it's pitiful. We're really just wasting Khalil Mack's prime at this point, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, especially one of the greatest defensive players of this era. We're just wasting it. And heading into this draft, the Bears have the 20th pick, the 52nd, the 83rd, the 147th, and the 179th. And looking at a whole bunch of mock drafts and big boards, and it's almost, it's a big almost, but it is almost a blessing in disguise for the 20th pick, because there are 2 pretty good prospects, both at tackle. Dylan Radunz, R-A-D-U-N-Z from North Dakota State, and Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech. Both tackles. Both can kind of play guard, but they're both really just tackles. I think Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech would have a little more luck playing guard, but they're both tackles. Both Pro Football Focus and WalterFootball.com. I looked at those 2 mock drafts. Those are probably the best sites as far as like prospects and statistics and data, and looking at like all of that and making educated guesses in terms of like who would be the best selection there. Both agree like, yeah, these are the 2 best tackle prospects in this range of picks, like the mid to late first round, like 18 to 24. These are the best. So that's something the Bears need to address right away. And then there was a trade, possible trade for Carson Wentz, and that scares the hell out of me, because that is not. You see, this is why it would be almost impossible to be general manager of any team, because this is something I could spend a year and a half thinking about and not come to a decisive conclusion. I mean, this is an impossible decision to make, and it sorry, I just had a small attack of the Barack Obama. What was that one clip of Barack Obama, like and that I had that, but it was with it. And it's interesting because with Carson Wentz, we've seen the best of Carson Wentz. The best of Carson Wentz is a top 7 guy. I mean, we're talking, it's Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, maybe Kyler Murray. I'm probably blanking on a name, and then him. Like he is elite. I think if you're a top 8 guy, you're elite. If you look at a guy like Russell Wilson, he's not top 3, or he might be top 3, but personally I have, did I say he was top 3? Who did I say? Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Williams. So I got Bulls basketball in the brain. You've got Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. Yeah, he's top 3. Lamar Jackson, probably Tom Brady, maybe. Yeah, probably Tom Brady. Kyler Murray, and then Carson Wentz is who I thought would be like the top 7 this year. He's been awful. He has been atrocious, like disgustingly bad. The most interceptions in the NFL, and he only played 12 games. And he threw 15 interceptions and 16 touchdowns. Horrendous. He was tied for most in the league with Drew Lock. Who, after the season was over, everyone was like, oh my God. Pardon me. Who, at the end of the season, everyone was like, oh my God, the Broncos, they got young talent, but they're in the market for a quarterback. They are definitely in the market for a quarterback. And to have someone who tied him for the most interceptions in 4 fewer games in Carson Wentz, I don't know if I would touch that as the Chicago Bears. I mean, we've seen NFL, not for long. NFL stands for not for long. Most people, if you have a 5 to 6 to 7 year career, you are a good player. Like, congratulations. Like, you made it. Like, you spent your whole life trying to compete at the highest level, and you were at the highest level for 4, 5, 6 years. You are a good player. Carson Wentz is already 28 years old. I don't know if he can rebound from this. I say already 28 as if 28's old. But for a guy who's had a concussion, a reconstructed knee, it's tough. It's tough. And I think what really did it for Carson Wentz is in 12 games, he was sacked more than any other quarterback at 50. 50. The next closest is, you guessed it, Deshaun Watson at 49 and Russell Wilson at 47. But 50 times in 12 games, that is ridiculous. That is almost 6 times a game. Not quite 6 times. It'd be 12 times 5 is 60, so not quite 60 times. But it was almost 5 times a game that he got sacked. I mean, that is abysmal, and it's not a stretch to say that he had I don't think it's a stretch at all. He had the worst offensive line in the NFL. And also, I'm going to give him another thing of slack too before I get to another thing. It's COVID. Everything is wonky because of COVID. Everything is wonky because of COVID. Like, just look at the NBA if you need any further proof. The Heat just made the finals. They stink right now. Absolutely stink. Like, I mean, obviously they're going to get better, but the fact that they started off this slow is telling that COVID affects people. Even if you're like me and you're just a student and you're just hanging out, and because of all the extra time you have because you can't work out and you can't hang out with friends, you're recording a podcast alone in your apartment, then hey, there's that too. But for a lot of people, it dramatically affects your physical and mental health. Look no further than yours truly and me. Drastically affects your physical and mental health. It makes you start podcasts that no one listens to, and it makes you do a push-up and run out of breath. And it's difficult to blame someone who had such a dramatic decline and not take COVID into account. And you look at his wide receiver group, horrible. I'm talking Jalen Reagor only playing 11 games. Greg Ward, I don't know who that is. He played 16 games. Alshon Jeffrey played 5. Alshon Jeffrey played 7. Deshaun Jackson played 5. John Hightower played 13. Travis Fulgham played 13. And a bunch of other guys I've never heard of, including Quez Watkins, Quez. Dope-ass name. Don't know who he is, though. They were 28th in the league in passing yards per game, and Wentz never threw it better than 64.29%. Completion percentage, that is. He threw it 58% or worse 7 of his 12 games. So in only 5 games did he throw it better than 58%. And to close out his season, this is almost the nail in the coffin for me. Threw 40%. 6 for 15 for 40% to close out the season. So he's ending on a horrible note. Jalen Hurts is clearly the future for this Eagles team. I don't think that can be argued. And Wentz, the Bulls already have a sunk cost prospect. Wentz would just be another one. Because when you give up a second round pick, the number 2 overall pick for Mitchell Trubisky in 2017, you're going to stick with him. It's like poker, because I play a lot of poker. When you put a lot of money into a hand, and that flop comes, let's say you got ace king, the flop comes 8-7-6, and you're like, you played the hand perfectly, you raised, they called, you're like, there's nothing they have that could beat me. Maybe they got like a pair of queens, maybe they got jacks. There's no way they're going to beat ace king. This is the best hand outside of a pair of aces or a pair of kings. I mean, a pair of queens is probably a little better than ace king, but ace king is an incredibly good hand. You raise it, they call, and then it's like 4-7-8 offsuit, and you're like, well, great. If they got a low pair, like you only ever raise if you got ace king, all of a sudden it's 4-7-8 offsuit or 4-7-8 rainbow, and then they know what I have now immediately. Like you can try to bluff them, but like a good player will know for a fact when you have ace king, and if they have a pair of jacks or if they've got 9-10 and like an open-ended straight draw comes out, like you just got to bail. You just got to bail the hand. You just got to be like, you know what? I had ace king. 90% of the time, this is a winning hand. But you know what? I'm in like the small blind. I push. They push. I'm like, damn it. Okay. Well, I just raised the pot. Now they called me, and now it's like 4-7-8 offsuit. I don't know what to do. Sometimes you just got to let go of the hand. Sometimes it's like, you know what? Ace king. It doesn't always win. It just usually wins. The number 2 overall quarterback usually is great, but not always. And this is the point with the Bears. You drafted someone who's a sunk cost, and now you're going to try to trade for someone who's a sunk cost with an expensive contract. This is not a swing I would take. This is not something I would do. Wentz's extension hasn't even kicked in yet. It's 4 years, $128 million. If you give up something to get Carson Wentz and he's great, you know? Maybe it's a top 15 guy, and then you got the best quarterback in franchise history. Because the Bears have never had a great quarterback, especially not in the last decade. But if he's not, no team is touching him with a 25-foot pole. If you sign him, and let's just say he's below average, you're stuck with him for 4 years. Like, I don't know what they would do because they're also in salary cap hell. But if they mess this up, which they probably will, the Bears are going to be crippled for years. This is just a flat-out risk I would not take. The Eagles want a first-round pick in exchange for Wentz. They should attach a first-round pick to get rid of him. This is a big risk. If I was the Bears, I wouldn't take. I would steer very, very clear from this. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all again so much for listening. Subscribe if you liked it, and pop.